rapidly.
So not only is demand increasing here in the United States, but it's increasing around the world, which adds up to a whole lot more aluminum.
Annie started with Industrious Labs, an organization focused on reducing the climate impact of aluminum and other industrial materials. She says aluminum production requires a lot of electricity, and in places like China, where more than half of the world's aluminum is produced, much of that electricity comes from burning coal, so it creates a lot of global warming carbon pollution. But in places where more electricity comes from renewables, for example Canada, which uses a lot of hydropower, the climate impact is far less. Sartor says in many areas, renewable energy is becoming cost competitive.
Coal is not as cheap as it was comparatively around the world anymore.
So she says there's an opportunity for the industry to switch to using more clean energy and limit the harm aluminum production has on the climate. Climate Connections is produced by the Yale Center for Environmental Communication. To learn more about climate change, visit climateconnections.org.
Hey, this is Jack Sullivan from Animal Panic, and you're listening to Harper Radio on 88.3 WHCM.
If you're looking for a pet, please consider adoption. Second City Canine Rescue right here in Palatine, Illinois is committed to rescuing homeless animals and placing them into permanent, loving homes. Largely volunteer operated, Second City Canine believes in rescuing responsibly. All breeds, ages, sizes, and colors are welcomed and loved. For adoption or volunteering information, reach out to Second City Canine Rescue at sscrescue.org.
New music, updated weekly on Harper Radio.
Welcome to Global Education Unpacked, a podcast exploring the dynamic world of international education, global business, and cross-cultural collaboration. This podcast is produced by Harper College Business Department, Oakton College Business Department, and WHCM Harper Radio. I'm Marie Lapidus, and I'm joined by my co-host, Lisa Cherovich.
Hi.
Hello. Together, we'll dive into the opportunities, challenges, and innovative approaches shaping global education today. From study abroad and virtual exchanges to sustainability and entrepreneurship, we'll bring you insights from experts like us, educators like us, and students, well, kind of like us, right? Always a student forever, around the world. Join us as we unpack the trends and ideas driving global education forward. So, welcome to our very first episode of Global Education Unpacked. I'm Marie Lapidus, coordinator of the Business Department and professor of business at Harper College.
And I'm Lisa Cherovich, professor of business at Oakton College and the primary international business instructor there.
Awesome. So why our podcast? You wanna start with that one? Unpack our reasons for the podcast?
Sure. Well, actually, if it wasn't for international, I probably wouldn't be sitting here with you. So when I applied for my part-time job many, many moons ago, I put my resume on a cover letter that was. I had an online consulting business called Europe by Design, and so I turned in my application, and the guy who was looking for instructors looked at me and said, "Can you teach international business?" I said, "Sure." And that I really had no experience other than I was already falling in love with the world. And so one thing led to another. And when I got my full-time job, Oakton had a global business program, and I just kind of worked my way in there, and I've never left.
Right. And so why do we want to do this podcast?
Well, I think the world, we live in a global environment, right? And so being connected, and I know both of us feel very strongly in giving our students the opportunity to connect with students and faculty and people all over the world is invaluable, especially I think at this moment. It's what's needed.
I totally agree with you. I don't know which camera I'm on. 3, 1, 3. Awesome. I'm on 3. So I kind of fell into international by default because I'm an immigrant and I feel like I'm already international. And so I came here as a 10-year-old from the Soviet Union, and I feel that gives me the right to say I'm an international person.
For sure.
For sure. And then I started at Harper now over 10 years ago, and I told we have an international office. We have Office of International Studies, and I told them that I'm a terrible colleague because I started doing international stuff without ever telling them I'm doing international stuff. And so I own that, like that I should have been involved in that more. And so now I am like fully immersed into that because I've done some virtual exchanges, and I've been teaching global business as well. Again, solely probably from the fact that I feel like I am, international just by my being. So, and then Lisa and I met at Oakton because I used to teach at Oakton, and we have been friends ever since, and we've been doing international stuff together and talking about international together, and doing the virtual exchanges, the same ones through IREX and whatever. And so we decided that we need to start sharing, and we've been going to a conference. CCI, do you know what CCID actually stands for?
Yeah, Community College for International Development.
There we go. So I terrible with acronyms, and so I keep forgetting to switch these. And I wanted to. There were faculty there who were asking for suggestions and tips and stuff, and I thought, well, we have some. Mm-hmm. We've been doing some stuff already, and there's people coming up the pipeline who want to know how to do things. We also wanted to let the students know what it's like to be in an international classroom, or a classroom that's a class that's internationalized, which we'll talk about what that actually means. And so we decided that we're going to share that with you, and we're going to do this in this podcast. Our first one. So let's talk about, we have like a little guide here, our experiences in global education. So what have you developed at Oakton? Talk about that.
Well, let me just think from the beginning. When I was on sabbatical, well, actually, I guess it wasn't called sabbatical. I was teaching in Seville, Spain. And shout out today is Dia de Andalucia. So it's, I'm Sevillana in my heart. And it was through that experience, I think, because by that time I had already gone to 30 countries, but having the opportunity to stay somewhere, unpack my suitcase, and really get into the culture was when I started to think we need to be able to give this opportunity to our students in a variety of ways, because not every student is going to be able to unpack their pack their suitcase, go somewhere and unpack their suitcase. So it was at the very end of that experience that I found a woman who taught business at the private university there, and we basically cobbled together our own international experience where students would work on a simulation and cross-cultural teams, and we did that for four semesters, 4 fall semesters, and it went very well. My students understood that there are other ways to look at things. The Spanish student, it was primarily Spanish. It was an Erasmus program, which, if you don't know what that means, Erasmus is the EU program where students can go and study anywhere in the EU as if it was their own home institution. And so they pay whatever they would have paid if they were, let's say it's a Polish student, whatever they would have paid if they stayed in Poland. And so their classes were already international. And I just think, we teach business and we talk about this all the time, that we live in a global environment. I mean, you put up a website and you have the opportunity to be international just by the fact that you have a website. Somebody can find you. And so allowing students to have this opportunity while they're still in college, and where I can help to guide them, and there's some structure around it, I think is invaluable. And it's interesting because I was on sabbatical last year in the Netherlands. I know it sounds like all I do is travel, which if I had my druthers, that would be what I would do. But when my office mate wrote the recommendation for me to get the sabbatical, she specifically mentioned, because I did it in the Netherlands, that she specifically mentioned that what I do in the classroom with international is what that they would expect at the global. She actually was at Stanford for her master's, and she was at Northwestern for her PhD, and she said that this kind of experience is on par with what they deliver at these elite institutions. And, for me, it's just me doing something that I love and exposing students to that opportunity to have that international experience. And so there's lots of ways to do it. We saw it during COVID. I mean, the virtual piece is definitely, I think, here to stay, but also, what they call the mobility, where you're actually getting on a plane and going somewhere, and everything in between.
Absolutely. And I think my kind of foray into doing global has been trying the virtual exchange. And we started doing the virtual exchange before COVID hit. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like something that was unfamiliar to us, and everybody during COVID just went online and started doing virtual. We were planning to do virtual to start with. And so COVID didn't help that, but then, continued to do virtual exchanges. And that kind of was my foray into bringing international. But I brought it not into the classroom, I brought it to my business club. And so I did that with the business club. And I also started teaching more of the global business class and trying to bring in the fact that culture is super important to business. Maybe the most important part, because if you don't understand the culture, you're not going to be successful with the business. And how do you acclimate students to learning these cultural competencies and learning about other people, and making sure that even when they're in the United States, I mean, we always say United States, the melting pot, right? But we do have a lot of people here from different cultures, and understanding them even at work in the United States without ever going anywhere is just as important as going someplace and having those experiences with those people there as well. So we need to make sure that everybody's internationalizing their classroom. And so I think we need to talk about, right, like, what does internationalizing mean? What do you think that means?
That's a good question. I think you can internationalize a classroom on many different levels. I think, to your point, the first thing, and I'm obsessed with culture. That's, I always say to students, culture is the way we're programmed. And you and I have been good friends for a long time. You're from Russia. I was born here. We definitely have some cultural differences, but understanding, I understand where you're coming from. I might not always agree with you, as you know, right? But just understanding how people are programmed, it can make a world of difference in your experience, in your communications, and getting things done. And I know, to your point about, I just met with a young man yesterday who's considering doing a study abroad, and he kept saying to me over and over, he works at a landscaping place that's in Oakton's district. He said, I work with all of these Hispanic gentlemen, and I want to understand them better. I want to be able to communicate. I want to be able to connect with them. And I thought, that's really thinking ahead and really important. And this young man already is thinking, like, how can I because he's decided this is going to be his career, and he wants to make sure that not only is he doing a good job with what he does, but also with the people that he's interacting with. So,
Absolutely, and I think again we have so many people here. This is one of the countries that actually has the opportunity for you to learn about all these different cultures. So, what does it mean to bring international into the classroom? I mean, I've done it just by giving a module on what does it mean to have like global competency, so that the students even think about like what is a global competency, right? So I've used modules for that from like a different source. I did not create my own. I give them assignments that require them to research other countries. Yesterday in the global business class, obviously there's plenty of opportunity to learn about different cultures, but I have a group of apprentices who are supply chain apprentices, and I have a group of apprentices who are insurance apprentices, and it was kind of interesting to talk to them about medical tourism, and I brought that into the classroom and to talk about what's happening in the world, and kind of, I think everybody was a little surprised at the level of what exists. Thank you, ChatGPT, for providing all that information. And so it was really a fun conversation of like, what are we going to do? What are the ethical implications? All of that. So that is an example of internationalizing your classroom. If you're going to talk about, even if you're in biology, if you have, you start talking about medical tourism and what is happening with that. Or if you're teaching history, you can definitely obviously bring that in. Every single class needs to have an international component, I think. I think that's the key.
I totally agree.
What do you do in your class? Like, what's an example of internationalizing a class?
Well, as I said, we had the opportunity to do the cross-cultural teams, but I've also done things like somehow I convinced Oakton to pay my students, acted as consultants for a company. It was a business-to-business endeavor. They were in Germany and helping them with their branding. And this was for my marketing class, and it was fantastic. We had somebody who was kind of their coach from Germany, but it was an opportunity for them to see some of the cultural differences. I mean, Germans are very blunt, and even though they did a great job, they felt like they didn't, and I had to coach them. Don't be surprised if that's how they speak to you. And so it's that kind of things. Of course, we did the IRIX thing. I'm trying to think. I did something with Austria one semester. This was through, I'm on the International Trade Association of Greater Chicago. I'm on the board. And this was with a gentleman who's on the board. He lives in Austria, and he put me in touch with a university in Austria where my students worked together on a project. And then they presented together at the end of the term, and that was very interesting.
Are you doing those like virtually as well? Like,
yeah, that was all virtual.
All virtual.
That was all virtual.
All virtual.
And again, this was.
Is it synchronous? So, like, are they meeting together, or do you do a lot of asynchronous things?
A lot of asynchronous, but with the collaboration in Spain, she was able to move her. We're 7 hours behind them, so 9:30 is 4:30 p.m. So they're what we would call back in the day. I don't even know if it's called the recitation or they meet a couple times and then they have an extra meeting in the week. That was changed to be at 4:30 their time, 4:30, 5 o'clock. And of course, in Spain, they have that big break in the afternoon and then they go a little bit later. So it worked out. With the Stevens Initiative, or the IREX, we met on Friday, right? So that seemed to be the day that was most convenient for both my students and the students that we were working with. So there has been a synchronous part of it, but a lot of it is done asynchronously. And so and then I'm working with a lady this term, a company this term, that I actually met this woman and her husband when I was at Keukenhof, which is where the flowers, it's like a flower park in the Netherlands. And we I happened to sit at her table while I was while I was having lunch there. And long story short, she runs a sustainable, she's got a, what do you call it, a sustainable material fabric company. She used to work for Target. And so she was saying that how she's having a hard time getting it off the ground. And I, of course, volunteered my students. And so we didn't do anything in the fall, but I reached out to her because students had expressed an interest in sustainability in my marketing class. I'm like, I have the program for you. So most of this will be an international collaboration because a lot of, most of the rest of the world is way ahead of us when it comes to sustainability. So the kids don't know it yet, but they're going to be doing a lot of research on the international side along with the domestic. But these are the kind of projects I try to find, or they seem to find me, and that students are able to work on.
So have you gone on like a faculty-led study abroad? Have you taken them somewhere or no? I think you've done a study abroad, right?
Well, yes. And so I had the good fortune I was in Spain for a semester, and then 2 years later, I was selected to go to Dijon, France for an ISIP, where I hung out with the kids for a month. They were there studying in what's not Bordeaux? What's the other big region?
Lyon?
No. Where the best wine comes from. It starts with a B. It escapes me. But anyway, in that part of France and Burgundy. Thank you.
Oh, Burgundy.
Huh. I thought you studied there.
I was in Paris.
So I did that, and then what happened? We've tried to put a few trips together for students to go. We haven't had one go yet, but I'm hopeful that is something that is in the very near future for a short-term study abroad, because not everybody can go for even a month, right?
Right.
So doing a week or 2 weeks would be great. Sorry.
So I have not led a study abroad, so I'm kind of excited of trying to set one up. I think that will be really interesting to go with the students and see how they react when they're in a different country. I'm just waiting for that drama of like, oh my God, this is how it works somewhere else. And
No.
how do I get my bags from the as you go through the airport kind of thing?
Actually, now that you mention it, I did lead a short-term study abroad. I was still just an adjunct, and we went to Greece.
Oh, cool.
And it was a small group, a small but mighty group, and it was really interesting. The one thing that always stuck out to me, we had two things actually. We were able to go to Eli Lilly, and the director of communications happened to study at University of North Carolina, and so not surprising, right? That's right there in Research Park Triangle. But he reminded us how you never see ads for drugs in Greece, and that's because it's paid for by the government, right? And so I talk about that. I mean, the students who were with me like, wow, we didn't think about that, but that was just a really big difference. And the other thing that really stuck with them and me, we went to Metaxa, which is the big, I think they're the biggest brandy company, certainly in Greece. And while the Greeks are really, really surprisingly good at English, they were saying one of the biggest challenges is they're dealing with people from all over the world where English isn't their first language, particularly in Eastern Europe or whatever. And so there's a lot of miscommunication. And so I reminded my students how lucky they are that English is, first of all, the lingua franca, the language of business, and that they're native English speakers, but that you shouldn't just take that for granted, right? That you if you're going to be doing business internationally and in a certain part of the world, it's probably not a bad idea to get at least some of the basics down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having another language is super important. And I want to proudly say that the both of us speak at least one other language, and usually two. And I'm doing the Duolingo on for Italian. I don't know how useful it is, but I just wanted to learn Italian because I took one semester of it when I came back from France, or 2 semesters just for fun. and but I don't remember really a lot.
Oh, Italian's my favorite.
I love Italian.
It just sounds so beautiful.
Yes.
Yep.
I mean,
Even though they could be cussing you out, but it sounds very,
I know, right?
very beautiful.
And they're so animated when they talk. I
They-
love it. Like, I love it. Even when they talk in the Duolingo, there's like
Yeah.
animation of the language. So why do you think our podcast is going to be, we're getting close to wrapping it up. Why do you think we're going to be so important?
Well, I think it's what is needed right now. I always tell my students when we're in class that I have to talk about politics. I have to talk because politics has an impact on everything business related, and so we're in a time where things are changing, and being able to relate to that, right? How those changes might have an impact not just on domestic business but on international business and people around the world, right?
Right.
And so I think what we're learning is that we are way more connected than we ever maybe recognize. And so when something happens in one part of the world, people all over the world are paying attention. And so I think that's really important.
Yeah, I always tell my students you can't take politics out of business.
Nope.
Or business out of the politics
No.
side. So, and I was just listening to a George Carlin thing where he went on a rampage about how, businesses run the world and the politicians are just puppets.
Yeah.
And I was like, pretty close. So you have to kind of align that. And it's, right now for us, those are difficult conversations. And I think, a lot of people in the United States who, again, are not necessarily native born here are affected by U.S. policies. So that cultural understanding and their reaction to what is happening to them, we also need to understand and talk about and, give them the space to express how they're feeling.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because I was going to bring this up earlier, but I think this actually is a good time to talk about it. One of my favorite experiences or memories from the things that I've done internationally came when I was working with an IRIX cross-cultural collaboration with some students in Jordan back in 2021, I think it was. And it was a spring class, so it got done in the beginning of May. And it was a moment in time where the things were heating up there in Gaza. And the Jordanian students said to my students, pay attention to what's going on, read your media carefully. There's two sides to the story. And I responded to the group. I said, you've got an advocate in me. I'm reading different things and paying attention. That I think it was that day I was going in the city, and one of my favoriteest students. I know I shouldn't admit I have favorites, but I do. But I saw
we're like grandparents. We can pick favorites.
Yeah. So I was on my way into the city. I was going to go putt-putt golfing with a friend, and I saw that he was attending this pro-Palestinian demonstration or support event. And so I asked my friend if she wouldn't mind going, and she said, yeah. So we went, and I was talking to these women, and they had, I always mispronounce it. It was like, it's the scarf, the white and black scarf that they wear. And I said, wow, that's really, really special. And she's like, here, have one. She had one for me and my friend. So we both posed with her very, we're very proud. And I put it on all my socials and look at me, aren't I great? Well, I was in bed about 9 o'clock that night reading my Kindle, and all of a sudden my WhatsApp started blowing up. And what happened was this girl that we posed with was an influencer. It went round the world in 8 hours. By the time I looked, this girl had put it on her socials, talked about how she met a professor and this other woman, and she had like 60,000 likes.
Wow.
And so to me, that was kind of an aha moment, that what happens in one part of the world, definitely people are watching. And so if people are watching, I think that we need to make sure that we're giving them, something positive to look at.
Absolutely. And I think that what we're going to do is we got to finish up now because we're out of time. But this is this is what you're going to get out of our podcast. We're going to be talking, we're going to be bringing in faculty, we're going to be bringing in students, we're going to be bringing in, professionals who are influencing international business and any internationalization. And, we'll bring in our colleagues, we'll bring in the Harper, the Department for International Studies, so you can learn about what happens with them. And so students can hear about what happens in the classroom and the interesting things you'll be learning and the competencies you're going to gain. And then we're also, for faculty, we're going to give you suggestions and try things because, we all like to try and, steal from each other, which
It's called R&D, Rob and Deliver.
Rob and deliver, and we're going to give you lots of things to rob from, and you are, more than welcome to all of those and to putting them into your classroom. So I want to say that, again, this podcast is being produced by the Harper Business Department, by the Oakton Business Department, by WHCM. We have an awesome producer with us, Matt Byrne, who is running all of the equipment for us, so we really, truly appreciate him. Our music is Mint by DJ Double Dip. We love him. He used to be on the station as well. So this is going to be our podcast to you. So look for us. Find us on YouTube. We're going to be on the podcasting platforms. We'll let you know which ones. This is our first one, so we're going to work on everything, including our logo, and you will be hearing from us again. Thanks for listening.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.
WHCM 88.3 FM. We're a broadcast station of Harper College and its Board of Trustees. That's right, folks. This is Harper Radio, coming to you from Palatine, Illinois. Right on!
Visit us on Instagram at Harper Radio FM for the latest from the station, or just to chat about music. In the meantime, stay tuned for more music in just a bit.
Hey, are you a student at Harper College and looking for a way to get involved around school? Consider joining Harper Radio. Host your own show. Get on the radio. Meet some new people. Come join us. Check out harperradio.com. There's a little button that says Get Involved. Click it, send a message to Matt, our GM, and he'll get back to you. And get yourself on the air. We'll see you soon.
Completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.